Real quick, I've got big news, guys. I'm launching a new podcast called Obsessed, where I investigate hobbies, fandoms, trends, lifestyles, careers, anything that makes people obsessed, and I find out why the people who love this thing are obsessed by trying it out for myself and by talking to the people. I'm launching with 3 episodes about rapping, a Lord of the Rings trading card game, and barbecue, but I think there's probably a Taylor Swift episode in the future. If you're excited, let me know in the comments, and I'm excited to show you. We may or may not be having a little contest that involves some Amazon gift card giveaways when the time comes. All right, back to Evermore. So here's how this is going to work. Because if I play the music out loud, YouTube will take all the money away from this video. I'm gonna listen to the song, read the lyrics, and then tell you what I think. I like the sound of Willow. Musically, I don't think it's anything super special, and it sounds like she's going back to a little bit of her country era roots. Or almost like that one song she did for the Hunger Games soundtrack. I really like that song, and I think this has a flavor of that. Lyrically, it sounds like she's saying, you know, I've been through some stuff, but you're pretty awesome, and I'm a willow tree that the wind has bent right over, and, you know, you're just the super cool guy that I like, which means it's probably about her boy. I could have done without her rhyming willow with pillow in the second verse, which I know sounds really picky, but it just seems so predictable. Champagne Problem sounds like a Hallmark movie gone wrong. Like, I like the music on this, and I particularly like the bridge where she speeds up the tempo of what she's saying, and it's kind of got this lilt to it. Lyrically, it's about this guy who wants to propose to this girl, but she had also been wanting to tell him that she was gonna dump him at this point, and so it kind of goes wrong, and she ends it by saying something that I actually really liked. I thought it was well said. You'll find the real thing instead. She'll patch up your tapestry that I shred. Just not saying that anybody in this relationship is necessarily the bad guy. It's just, it wasn't going to work, and I'm sorry that I've hurt you in this way, but it's gotta be, and I know you'll find healing one day, which I think is kind of cool. All right, I'm gonna basically skip Gold Rush just because I found it pretty boring, and it's basically just Taylor saying, oh, I wish I could be with you. And it kind of makes it sound like it's just about a fake person, and it's not that interesting. But 'Tis the Damn Season follows the narrative of a famous person who lives in LA, and I think Taylor Swift mostly lives in New York, so I don't think this is about her. So it's a fictional narrative, which is something she's been doing more, not only on this album, but also on Folklore, and it's interesting. It's like she's run out of some of her own stories to tell because her life has just gotten a little bit normal. So she started to transition to creating other stories. And she has plenty of material to come up with the details and the narratives for these. But it's an interesting development that I think we've seen her make more and more over the past couple of albums. And this one's kind of interesting. It's mostly a star-crossed lovers, like, I wish I could be with you, but for some reason I can't, and so I'll go back and think fondly about how I miss you. Overall, kind of a cool song. Musically, not really my pop, exciting, fun, alt-rock sort of jam, but I get why it's good. I am going to be picky. I have a bone to pick here, and nobody's gonna care, and nobody should take this seriously, but she does say, I'm staying at my parents' house and the road not taken looks real good now, which is a allusion to the Robert Frost poem. And that poem is not about like, oh, we missed out on that road and what could have been. No, that poem is about saying, you spent so much time thinking about which road to take that you eventually, you know, what will happen on this road that I didn't take, and that's a waste of time to do that. Not a, oh, wouldn't that be a good thing? The poem is often misquoted, but the misquoting of the poem has been accepted into the common interpretation of it so much that, you know, we could just kind of basically say this is an allusion to the perception of the poem rather than the poem itself, and not really harsh or mellow over it too much. But as somebody who has taught this poem in English class before, it irks me. And then we come to Tolerate It, and she's doing that exact same narrative structuring thing again. It is a very vulnerable, a very soft-spoken and quiet and sad song. Lyrics like, basically, it's about this woman in a book that Taylor had read, who's trying to get the attention of her husband, and I greet you with a battle hero's welcome. I take your indiscretions all in good fun. I sit and listen. I polish plates until they gleam and glisten. You're so much older and wiser than I. And this guy never really seems to give, this guy who is this woman's husband, never seems to give her any notice, and it's a really sad concept. And Taylor does a great job of providing a soundtrack, but I think at this point in the album, the songs have all started to kind of meld for me a little bit, and I'm not musically talented by any stretch of the imagination, and so somebody else who is a little bit more musically intelligent than I might be able to point out, oh, well, this is unique and this is cool and this is crazy. But most of them just kind of sound all the same. Guys, No Body, No Crime is crazy. It's featuring Esty Haim from Haim. And it's basically Taylor, she says at the very beginning, Esty's a friend of mine. We meet up every Tuesday night for dinner and a glass of wine. She's been losing sleep. Her husband's acting different. And essentially her husband kills Esty, covers up the murder. And then Taylor, like the character Taylor, real life Taylor, whoever, goes and kills the husband and blames it on the husband's new mistress who replaced Esty. It's such a weird combo of real life and narrative, and it's so weird, and it's actually really cool. I really do like this one, and it musically very different, goes back to the country roots, and so it's some needed variety for me anyway, and it's actually a lot of fun. Happiness is not a happy song in any way. The chorus, there'll be happiness after you, but there was happiness because of you. Both of these things can be true. There is happiness, and she really seems to be grappling with the dissonance in a physically abusive relationship. Like, hey, things were good at one point, and now they're not, and both of those things can be true at once, and you can kind of have to accept those. It sounds like what she's saying, and the whole song just seems to be about grappling with that in our history across our great divide, and that seems to be the divide between the lack of happiness and the previous happiness. Dorothea seems to be a continuation of the storyline from 'Tis the Damn Season, but I think it's from the guy's perspective because he's referring to the girl as being Dorothea and being this famous person. Musically, I really like this one. This is a really cool song. It's very wistful, but still has some energy to it that I really like. Ivy, I think, is a fantastic song. She does this fictional narrative again, and she's singing to this guy. Like she's married to somebody, but she's singing to this guy who is very tempting for her. She says, "My pain fits in the palm of your freezing hand, taking mine, but it's been promised to another. Oh, I can't stop you putting roots in my dreamland. My house of stone, your ivy grows, and now I'm covered in you." The one thing that really sets this apart, I mean, there's two things. One, it's a strong narrative, and you'll see in verse 3 that it develops and is very dynamic. But also the images and the nature imagery she uses to describe this and this illicit relationship blooming is so apt and just so well put together. My house of stone, your ivy grows. Like, her resolve is strong. I gotta stick with my husband, but your ivy is growing on me, and ivy cracks stone after a while, and despite it being so soft and gentle a plant. In verse 3, dare to sit and watch what will become and drink my husband's wine. And there's lines like that really hit you, and you think, gosh, this is such an interesting way to look at it. And she does just a really good job. I think that this song is really, really good. Coney Island just wasn't that interesting to me. It's this sort of brooding, wistful, thinking about what we could have become sort of topic that we see from Taylor Swift. Honestly, just a little bit too much. She's a great songwriter, incredible songwriter and singer and all this stuff, but I just personally don't connect with those as much, even though I know that everybody has those kinds of questions and thoughts, but I've always been a person who's been much more willing to charge into the future and say, here's where we are right now, let's move forward and go do what we need to do. And Taylor Swift seems to be much more reflective and ask a lot more what if questions. So I understand that there's a person who will appreciate that song more than I will, but I didn't have anything interesting to say about Coney Island. Cowboy Like Me is a narrative-based song too that I also just wasn't that interested in. Long story short is, I think, pretty cool. She kind of summarizes what the past 5 years or so have been like for her, and all these fights she's been in and all this drama that she didn't choose, but it all comes back to Joe. Long story short, it was the wrong guy. Now I'm all about you, I'm all about you, yeah, I'm all about you. And then we get the bridge, no more keeping scores, now I just keep you warm, no more tug of war, now I just know there's more. And that seems to sum up the song pretty well. It was kind of a bop a little bit, it had some good tunage to it, and I enjoyed listening to it. It was a little bit more fast paced and had a little bit more of a beat to it than a lot of these songs have, a little more of a drum element. She sounds very comfortable now that she's made it through all that and she's found a safe place and a safe person. I think Marjorie may be one of my favorite songs on the album. It is apparently about Taylor Swift's late grandmother. who inspired Taylor Swift to get into music partially. And these verses are really cool. Never be so kind, you forget to be clever. Never be so clever, you forget to be kind. And then in the chorus, what died didn't stay dead. You're alive in my head. Her grandma is still there with her, still inspiring her. Verse 2, never be so polite, you forget your power. Never wield such power, you forget to be polite. And it goes back to so many people, especially famous people, people in music, have this idea of absolutes. I've got the most money, I'm the best artist, I'm the toughest guy, I'm the whatever, you know? And they often miss the point because they're so worried about hitting their absolute. And this song speaks to one of measure and restraint and balance. And I think that's kind of cool. Closure is basically Taylor telling this guy who is, I think, an ex, who's saying like, hey, it'll be okay, no worry, we'll figure it out, we can get back together, let's find some closure. She's basically telling him, screw off, like I don't need you, I don't want you, and you suck. And I like that, that's a good song. But the very final song, Evermore, I think is particularly good. It seems to be a reverie or reflection on to an extent on depression, but not just like a chemical imbalance kind of depression, but also a situationally inspired depression. She has some December imagery in there, which is usually a dark theme and a sadness and a deadness for a time that eventually comes back to spring. And she highlights this in the bridge, or sorry, Justin Vernon from Bon Iver highlights this and says, oh, can we just get a pause to be certain we'll be tall again? Whether weather be the frost or the violence of the dog days, I'm on waves out being tossed. Is there a line that I could just go cross? But it's that line, we'll be tall again. We'll get through this. We'll make it through and things will get better. And it ends with the lines, this pain wouldn't be forevermore. I had a feeling so peculiar, this pain wouldn't be forevermore. It's a powerful sentiment and an important reminder, and I think that that's a theme that we see a lot of on Evermore. There's a lot of soft thoughtfulness, a lot of narrative storytelling, a lot of wistfulness, a lot of romance, a lot of lack of romance, but a lot of it is about things that were bad or are bad, but got better or will get better. The pain and the badness won't last forevermore. Like in 'Tis the Damn Season, this guy is going through heartbreak because he just got broken up with, but it's going to be okay, and he'll find somebody else who will help heal the tapestries that she tattered, the narrator did. And it's very appropriate that this album came out in December because it's kind of a December album. It's a little bit sad. A lot of the songs don't end happily. They end in a negative or a liminal or a waiting or a sad space. And it's up to the characters to figure out how to move on from there in the same way that it appears Taylor Swift has. Overall, I think it's a very cool album. I love Taylor Swift as an artist. She does so much good. I think that it's probably not my favorite album by her. I think I liked Folklore more, and it's gonna be hard for me to ever beat, you know, the beautiful songs on Red, or even 1989, which is when I first really started getting into her music. Even though I think Folklore is probably her best album ever. I think Evermore has a lot of the same vibes and everything. It's not my preference, even though I can see why it's a really, really good album. That being said, I enjoyed this very much. Hope that you've enjoyed this. If you're excited about my new podcast, Obsessed, be sure to be ready January 1st for that to launch. I think you guys are really gonna enjoy it. And if you're looking for a number, you need to calculate what the chance of rolling 3 dice and getting at least one even number is. And then you'll have some numbers. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.